All right, cool. There we go. All right. Okay, so Trent said he's doing the dishes. Cool.
Dishes, multitasking, true business.
All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our second workshop in DPT to CEO this year. We are going to be talking about the basics of hiring, and we have a special guest who I'll introduce in just a second. But we are all in a place where we are all like starting our own practices, and whether you are just getting started or you have a full caseload right now, you might have already been thinking about potentially hiring somebody. And so we brought in our special guest today to talk about the basics of that and when it might be a good opportunity, when it might not be, all the things to consider. And we'll kind of talk through all of that stuff today. And so welcome to Jeff, our special guest host tonight. It's his first time here on the workshop calls. So Jeff, if you don't mind kind of introducing yourself for everybody, and then we can kind of get started.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Morgan, and thanks to Sam and Trent for attending the workshop today, and hopefully other people that will watch the recording here. I guess before I introduce myself, I guess I just want to say congrats to anyone who's listening, because if you're watching this, your business is probably doing well. You're looking to hire people. You're looking to expand past yourself, which is probably the scariest part of owning a business, running a business, when you start to hand some of the daily tasks to someone else. So I started my business 4 years ago, and I have a mobile concierge business based out of downtown Chicago. I, like most of you, did outpatient with a big company, private practice, manual therapy, and then in-home rehab, and ended up settling into basically seeing private hire clients in their homes. I did it for 6 months part-time on the side of 2 other jobs, trying to kind of get the first couple clients going, and then made the jump to full-time about 3.5 years ago. I hired my first admin employee about 4 months after that. So that would have been she's been with me for about 3. And then I guess fast forward through a lot of stress. Now up to speed now, I have 3 contract part-time employees that are kind of just getting started doing a small amount of client work. 1 full-time PT that's been with me about a year and has a full caseload. And then I have a 3rd full-time PT coming on with me November 1st of this year. And my long-term goal, I guess, is to scale my practice and be able to kind of cover all of the Chicagoland area, which, if you're not familiar with Chicago, there's, it's a big place. So downtown is kind of where I got started. I ended up moving to the suburbs, and now some of the contractors are doing some work in the suburbs. So right now we're kind of expanding our area and expanding our marketing contacts, trying to continue growth. Let's jump into the slideshow. Does anyone have any quick questions or anything about my background or kind of where I came from and why I'm here today? Nothing?
We're all good.
Quick and dirty. All right. So objectives of today's slideshow. When it comes to hiring someone, obviously there's a lot of different variables that you're going to run into. And the information is going to come at you really quick. So objective, what things should you be considering when thinking about the first hire? Obviously, one of the major decisions that I kind of racked my brain on at the beginning was whether to hire an admin staff or a clinical staff first. So usually that's the first kind of thing that you start, your caseload starts to build up, the admin tasks start to build up, and you kind of hit a point probably around 20 to 25 patients a week, somewhere in there, where you just feel like your time is dwindling, and you start to lose track of some of the tasks that you want to do. You start to feel like your marketing isn't as effective, or your patient load is too much to handle. So when I kind of got to that point, I think I was around 25, and I was thinking at first that I wanted to hire a PT. thinking, okay, I'm getting, some new patients, my patient, I can do everything. I can market, I can, make all the phone calls I need to call. I can still treat my patients really well. I can get people's, home exercise program to them when I tell them I'm going to. And I thought I could kind of tackle the world. And I thought, okay, I can hire the first PT. I can build him up. Like, I was really scared to pay someone essentially to not bring money in, if that makes sense. It's a kind of a daunting task to say, oh my gosh, like, I'm going to take an admin here. I'm going to pay them however much, a couple $1,000s a month out of, your hard-earned money that you're getting for your clients. So that was really intimidating to me. It seemed like a big risk, and I didn't feel like I was big enough or ready at the time to start paying someone that wasn't going to bring in any money and couldn't see any patients. But when I got down to it, then I basically decided that I thought I needed to have a little bit more organization and offload some of the tasks that I knew that I could teach someone else to do. So I guess when it comes to that decision, my thoughts initially, or at least in my experience, it was better to hire an admin first and feel like I was more organized when bringing on a potential full-time PT. And that allowed me to offload a lot of the marketing tasks, a lot of the kind of just admin tasks that are going on behind the scenes. And then in my case, a lot of the financial organization and taxes and things like that. So basically everything besides treating patients. Back to the slide. So show dimensions to evaluate your new hire. So kind of some of the prep work that goes into figuring out, one, is it an admin? Is it a PT like we discussed? Two, if it is an admin, like what types of tasks do you feel like you're going to offload to that person? I think in Morgan's coaching, she has people organize their SOPs or their standard operating procedures, which is one of the hardest things I thought to kind of do in a business, is just kind of like organize what all needs to be done and then figure out, of that list, what are you able to teach someone else to do, or that admin hire to do. And then, say you do decide to hire an admin, then you start to interview people. Like, not everyone has a skill set that is going to lend itself well to, let's pick a task like, say a new client calls. Are you going to trust that admin to take the call and be able to sell an eval on the phone? It takes someone with maybe a little bit higher skill set, maybe some experience, that you would be willing to trust with something like that, because it's such a important and difficult thing, as you guys know, to do in a cash PT business. So thinking about if you were to hire an admin, what types of tasks that you would offload to that person, and what traits do you feel like you need to see in someone when you're interviewing them to trust them with, the tasks that you need them to be able to do. And then some logistical things. So W-2 versus 1099. This is one of the questions that we get initially a lot, is kind of the difference between the two, some of the paperwork that needs to get done, some of the things that we never learned in school because we didn't get any business training on how to kind of organize the proper paperwork and, get someone else in your system legally, and make sure insurance and all the stuff that needs to be, all the boxes that need to be checked are checked. So hopefully we hit a little bit about a lot of different considerations that get you to think a little harder about what you do need, how to evaluate that person, and then some of the logistical challenges with taking someone on for the first time, and some prep work that you can do in advance of that. Go ahead with the next slide, Miss Morgan. All right, so first slide of considerations here. So one of the big things that I thought really helped me kind of have 1,000-foot view of my business and kind of prioritize it in my head a little bit. And this is actually pulled from Paul Goff, some of Paul Goff's training stuff, if you guys are familiar with him. So basically dividing your business in your head into 4 departments. So any business, whether it's PT, service-based, sales, whatever it is, everyone has some, financial side of the business, which is, charging, accounting, accepting payments, taxes, budgeting, that sort of thing. Some of us PTs are good at that side. Some aren't. Most of us have not had any education there. But I luckily, with my admin hire, hired someone with experience that actually had a little bit of a finance background. So in my case, because of the person that I found, I thought after interviewing her that she could actually offload some of the back end accounting and some of the numbers analyzing side of the financial side of the business, which was great. Marketing, which is Morgan's forte, not my forte usually. So marketing, obviously generating new leads. There's a lot of different avenues of doing this, but is that admin hire or a PT hire have a skill set that's going to help you in that department? Another thing to think about, sales. So the non-clinical and clinical staff, kind of like we alluded to earlier, are you going to trust your admin to sell an eval on the phone, or is that going to be a task that you're going to have to do as the business owner? And then so evals versus follow-ups, or let's say it's a clinical staff when it comes to the sales side. Like, not most PTs haven't had to sell themselves. So interviewing a potential PT, thinking about a cash PT business versus a through insurance business, and does that person kind of have the personality or the skill set that you think will lend itself well to learning and being confident in selling themselves? And then the operations side of the business. So this is more the clinical side. So PT with experience, PT without experience, or are you going to have to spend some time on training that PT on the clinical side, or do they have that box checked? So 4 departments of the business, SOPs. So when you make the list of SOPs, dividing them into those 4 parts, and then when you're thinking about who you're going to hire first, PT versus admin, thinking about which of those SOPs that you need the most help with, and which employee and which person you're interviewing may lend itself as well to checking the box on those SOPs.
I like that. And I like how it's kind of like, if you lay everything out and then like evaluate where your strengths and weaknesses are, like instead of just, I need to hire somebody, you can actually like search for like the appropriate person to fill in the spots.
That's exactly right. So in my case, like I said, I was thinking that I wanted a PT, thinking my caseload was too full, but really I was very unorganized kind of with all the other things outside of treating patients. Mm-hmm. And I think luckily decided on the PT at the time without a lot of planning when it came to the SOPs and whatnot, and luckily hired someone that checked the boxes on some of these areas that I was struggling with at the time, which then allowed me to have a little bit better foundation when the clinical hire came about, because we made some progress on that organization and were able to set that person up for success.
Cool. Awesome.
I guess one last thing on that slide, like everyone's long-term goal may be different when it comes to a business. So asking yourself like where you want to see your business 5 and 10 years down the road, it's a difficult question to ask, but making sure when you're going to hire someone that the timing of your hire, the type of hire that you're making aligns itself with where you want to see your business in 5 to 10 years down the road. Go ahead, Morgan. So real quick on the logistics side of it. So right now I have 3 W-2 employees. So on the W-2 side, or that technically would be a contractor. So I guess I'm definitely not an expert in this. But what I've done is I basically created an employment contract that I actually pulled from a previous job of mine that I signed for someone else, and basically modified it to fit, what I thought was more needed for my business at the time. But I actually use a similar contract, whether it's a W-2 or a 1099, and I change out, a clause when it comes to basically their, what type of employee they're considered. But the bare bones answer for what the difference is between the two, the W-2 employee is not going to go through a payroll system. Their taxes aren't going to be taken out prior to them getting their paycheck. A or I'm actually backwards on what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Please switch that. So W-2 employee, you're going through your payroll system. You're taking out the taxes through the payroll system. Depending on the size of your business, you may or may not have that payroll system in place yet. I don't think I had that in place until I hired my first employee. So that could be something that you want to think about now if you don't have that in place before you hire and you are wanting to go the W-2 route. The 1099 route, sorry to screw that up, is the contractor, and this is a little bit less formal, less full-time type of an agreement between you and the employee, where you're basically just paying. In my case, I'm transferring via Zelle Pay, kind of a more informal payment structure, no taxes taken out. At the end of the year, then your accountant will help you then deliver the 1099, depending on how much they make from you, where they'll have to pay the taxes on the back end. So usually when I bring on a contractor, I'll have that conversation with them up front so they kind of know for their own taxes, that they are a 1099 employee, that they should set some of the money aside for taxes at the end of the year. And I basically used, most of my 1099 employees typically have another full-time job, and they're basically just kind of trying to test out the cash PT thing. I see some potential in them, but I don't want to commit to more of a salary type structure or a long-term full-time agreement between us and them. So it's a great way to kind of like dabble a little bit and get them under your roof a little bit, buy you a little time to start working with them, training them, and giving you a little insight into, whether they are or could be a good full-time employee with you long-term. W-2. So right now, just my admin, my full-time PT, and myself are W-2s, and then a full-time PT that's coming on with me November 1st that's currently doing some contract work will then stop being a contractor and switch to a W-2. I don't know, Morgan, do you have any other insight on that?
Yeah, sure. I had a question as well. But I guess just like really quickly about the 1099, pro tip on this is that you do have to provide a 1099 at the beginning of the calendar year for the previous tax year to anybody that you've paid more than $600. At least that's what it was the last time I looked at it. So what I do for everybody that I've hired is I have everybody fill out a W-9 form, regardless, like if I plan to pay them more than that or not, just so I have the information on file. Because last year when I went to go create my 1099s and send them out, I went through the IRS system, and you had to have set all of that up 45 days prior to the new year, I think, in order to do it online. So I had to do it with paper, and it was very stressful. So the earlier that you start thinking about it, so for the end of the 2021 tax year, this September, October would be a good time to make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row, from my experience doing the 1099s, just so that you have the information that you need moving into next year. That was kind of my experience doing that. And then I had a question for you, Jeff, about I was going to ask if you were a W-2 for your business, can you tell us a little bit more about that and what would indicate that you should be paying yourself as a W-2? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I don't know if I can answer that outside of just what my experience was. I'm not sure if I did it the right or the wrong way. I don't think there's a right or a wrong way necessarily, but I think when I went full time and stopped working for someone else, I kind of started to think about my business. Well, for the first time, think about my business as a business and not just a little side job. So I started to kind of get people around me that could help me understand these things a little bit better, knowing that we're PTs and we're medically trained and we're not business trained. So if you don't have a good accountant that helps you with the tax side of things, that person is going to answer a lot of the questions about W-2s and 1099s when it comes to more of the technicalities behind it, or Morgan said, making sure that you're not missing something that you should be doing when it comes to tax season. So if you don't have a good accountant, or at least an accountant that you can bounce questions off of, or someone doing the taxes for the business and your personal at the end of the year, I think that's definitely something that I would recommend earlier than later, before you make some of those mistakes. Just
Okay.
at least in my experience, trying to learn those things yourself is pretty difficult, and it didn't seem like something that I could handle or manage myself at the time. And then it's also my understanding, another caveat. So if you're a 1099 employee of your own business, you're likely going to pay a little more in taxes as a 1099 than you would if you were a W-2. I don't know what the percentage difference is, but I do know that that usually there's a little bit more of a tax burden as a 1099 than a W-2 for the same gross income every year, if that makes sense. Does that sound right to you, Morgan, or have you had that experience or no?
Yeah, that I remember learning a little bit more about that when I started doing home health as a contractor.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also my understanding up till
Mm-hmm.
this point. So,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have to do your taxes yourself as a 1099 contractor, versus as a W-2, your employer sets the taxes aside for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, fun stuff.
Trent or Assam, do you have any other specific questions about your situations right now when it comes to the W-2 versus 1099? Okay. Cool. We already kind of hit on the admin versus clinician side of things. I don't know if Assam, do you have any perspective on that? I know you're looking to make a hire, your potentially your first hire. I'm sure you've had that thought. And is there any insight that you have, kind of being at that stage of your business?
So what you were describing, your situation before, is exactly
Okay.
what I've been going through.
Okay.
So I'm kind of struggling to figure out, my concern is if I hire an admin, it's hard for me to hire someone that's not going to bring money in versus
Yeah.
a PT. So
Yeah.
there's exactly what I've been thinking
Yeah.
about.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of going over the 4 categories, and I feel like an admin might make more sense first, just because there are things that I'm maybe not my strength,
Yeah.
that an admin can kind of help me kind of
And
bridge that gap.
I think after going through that a couple times, I feel as though a general rule is, when you have a really anxious decision that you feel like at the time is a really big decision, we tend to think more about the short term, like the next month or two, and we kind of forget about the long term, and when really the long term is the big part of the decision, right? For example, so I have a new full-time coming on in November, and this is the first time I've kind of extended a fairly large salary, benefits, and what I view now at the time a huge short-term risk of paying a salary plus benefits for his whole family. And for 2 or 3 months, I'm going to feel that financial burden quite a bit, right, before this clinician is built up. But I know that I picked the right person, and that those 3 months are going to fly by. And as soon as he sells literally, maybe 4 or 5 packages, that is going to cover my financial burden every month for the short term, when the long term is getting him built up to the point where he's bringing in 20 to 25,000 a month, and that risk up front, or the reward long term outweighs that risk up front, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I also feel too, just for what it's worth, that the concern of paying somebody who's not necessarily bringing money in, just I would look at it as, maybe they're not bringing money in, but they're bringing time in. When we only have so much time to ourselves, if they can take care of all of the busy work stuff and just everything that could be delegated, then it frees you up to go out and make more money. So that's another way to look at it too.
I agree.
And then for an admin, did you hire someone part-time, then build them up full-time, or were you just kind of right away full-time?
In my specific case, I think at the time I was looking for someone more part-time, thinking, I didn't want to I wanted to take a smaller risk, not a larger risk. Once I got into the analyzing resumes, having some phone calls, doing some interviews, I ended up finding someone that I thought was a really good fit that actually, if I was listing my SOPs, dividing my business into those 4 departments, she actually, I felt, brought more to the table than I felt like I was looking for. But so I kind of found this person that I had this view of, oh my gosh, she could actually help me with the finance. She has experience with a certain type of marketing. She checked more boxes than I thought. So I was then faced with this dilemma, and she needed full-time employment. So she kind of pushed me from thinking I needed part-time, but then seeing value in her and investing in a full-time employee at the time, because I felt like she could bring a lot to the table and help move us forward.
Gotcha.
But I feel like in your case, the first step is figuring out, obviously, one, admin versus PT, and then once you decide on, potentially, I feel like I'm pushing people more towards admin. I don't necessarily think that is a end all be all answer to that question. I think in my case, I was not very confident with my marketing ability, finance. There were some weaknesses of mine at the time that I felt like needed to be filled in the business. So that pushed me towards the admin eventually. Maybe in Assam's case, maybe he's a rock star at some of the admin side of things to where he feels he can handle a smaller caseload plus the admin, and maybe it is, better time for a PT. But I feel like it can be different in everyone's business. So figuring out what you feel is the best for you in your specific situation would be the first step.
Yeah. And I like that of, identifying not only your weaknesses and what you feel like could be filled in, but also what are your strengths, as a solo, business owner and clinician right now. And there are quite a few people that I talk to where admin is gold. They can manage all the things, and make sure that everything's running really smoothly. And they would rather do that and hire a PT, so I think playing to your strengths as well is important in helping to identify what's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. Next slide.
So getting into some financial considerations when going into your first hire, a general recommendation and advice that I got kind of early on in the business from a finance perspective is to have something in the neighborhood of 3 to 6 months of expenses saved, and kind of be in a position where you're turning some form of a profit. As you know, if you're into your business, it's hard to kind of figure out exactly okay, am I turning a profit? Am I not? I can decide what to pay myself. How do I do that? Everyone's financial situation going into the start of their business is a little bit different, but at least in my case, I felt having some form of savings and financial padding going into a hire, made me feel a lot more comfortable with some, that first 3-month financial risk that we just mentioned in the conversation before. So when I say 3 to 6 months of expenses, and how do you calculate that if you get into it? So at least at this point, I would take whatever the payroll is every month plus whatever expenses outside of payroll, whatever that number is, times by 3 to 6. That'll give you kind of a good range of or some expectation on what to kind of have in a savings account. Not saying that you have to have that before you hire, but like I said, in my experience, having some form of padding before some of these decisions, I think clears your brain a little bit and allows you to enter that risk a little bit more effectively. Different types of contract structure. So we alluded a little bit to part-time versus full-time. We haven't talked yet about commission versus salary, but when it comes to a PT hire, obviously there's a lot of different ways you can structure a PT's contract. In my case, when I was kind of deciding how to do that, I put myself in the place of an employee. I had, before I started my business, worked for 4 different companies and kind of had different pay structures myself. So I kind of took from the experience of those 4 jobs and put together what I call a partnership track for incoming PTs. So I was always frustrated, feeling like I was a high performing PT in someone else's business, feeling like the typical structure for a PT, at least in my case, was you have kind of this base salary, and then you have some form of a bonus that you can hit if you hit some form of whatever numbers they're throwing at you. In my case, I felt like I was always performing, but usually falling short of whatever this bonus was. And that was always frustrating to me because I felt like no matter how good I was at my job, I wasn't being incentivized properly. So I've developed kind of like a commission formula. Not saying it's right or wrong, but it's kind of like the formula that I would want if I was an employee of my own business as a PT, where I feel, people are incentivized over time, one, to, see more patients, do a good job for their patients, fill their schedule, but, and then two, also stay with me, hopefully long term. So if you guys want to get more into details on that discussion, we can, but it's just something to think about if the PT hire is in the cards for you in the upcoming future. Cost of acquiring. So this would basically be a formula to figure out like how much it's going to cost you on the front end to hire an employee. Obviously, there's some costs associated with that. Usually a little bit more when it comes to hiring a PT than it does hiring an admin, but at least just thinking about, how much money is going to be coming out of the account when they sign that contract, what they need in place to get into that role and perform well in that role up front. Morgan, do you have any insight or any other questions regarding, I don't know if you guys want to talk about like the commission versus salary with the PT. I guess admin wise, I think it's probably helpful to give you a little bit of an idea. It's always hard to figure out what to pay someone. I think that I did a little research, and I think that like the scale of what you pay an admin is kind of can go from very low to very high. Obviously, like any other position, I feel like it depends on the person that you're selecting. In my case, I chose to pay someone more and hire someone full-time at a time where I felt like it was a huge risk. And I think in my case, I kind of got lucky. I have a really good person that works really hard and brings a lot to the table, but I also, pay her probably on the higher end of that admin pay scale. So I guess I've heard anywhere from probably $16 an hour up to $35, $40 an hour. So in my case, I can't remember exactly, but she's on the higher end of that, somewhere in the $30, $35 an hour. But she's also in her 60s. She's had 20 years of practice management experience with other healthcare businesses. She owned a small business herself and has some finance, side. So she brings a lot to the table that I thought commanded, a little bit more pay. Anything else financial that you guys either have questions on or want to hit on in discussion?
Yeah, I think that is a really important point to talk about, like how much to pay somebody, and maybe we can even talk about like how much to pay a PT, because I know that is also a question that some people have. Yeah. But like having like real life figures, I think is really helpful for a lot of people, because we just have like no idea
Yeah.
like what to pay anybody, and that's good to know, like for your admin. Sorry
to interrupt, Morgan, but I think too, like we are in a cash PT business. Like there's not a ton of big businesses. This is a new business concept, so I don't think there's really necessarily a playbook for how to pay a cash PT versus other business PT. Like we're kind of navigating this for the first time. So
yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, I mean, like if you don't mind going into the commission piece and kind of just like how you pay your PTs, I think that'd be really cool to hear about.
Okay. So I chose to set up a commission formula where essentially it's a percentage of revenue. So I thought like I was with a private practice through insurance business, and for the first time got at least a little insight of, okay, how much money am I bringing in for, whatever company through insurance. And then you kind of see that number, and then you see, okay, I'm making a salary of like, most of us were making around 80,000 or somewhere around there. I was at the time. So, what's that percentage? Is mostly 20, 30% maybe of what you're bringing in at the time. And I kind of saw that and was like, man, that sounds really low, right? Like,
yeah.
In my business, I don't have a clinic. I've chosen to have a little bit lower overhead model. I think for the reason that I want to be able to pay my PTs, more than what they would be making working for some of the other classic avenues of PT that we're used to seeing. So long answer short, I chose to do like a 50-50 split essentially. So Sunil, who's my full-time employee right now, is seeing 20 to 25 visits a week. And he is bringing in around 20,000 a month. And so basically what I do is I calculate his completed revenue, which is the total dollar amount of the visits that he did in a month. I take half of that, and that's basically his paycheck for the month. And then I alluded to kind of like a partnership track, essentially. So he's been with me a year, and he's been able to build up a caseload. And so that commission formula then increases a little bit over time with continued success over about a 4-year period, with the final step being considered kind of like a partner of the business, where he would make a higher percentage of his completed revenue, and then would have access to some other potential opportunities long term. So, and that's something that I kind of drew from, I guess my observation at the time was like, you see other healthcare practitioners like primary care doctors, dentists, chiropractors, some other businesses that tend to have 2 or 3 clinicians that are in small private practices that have some sort of partnership agreement. For some reason in PT, like you don't really see that a lot. Like it's usually like either a huge conglomerate company or like a one owner couple clinic thing. Like I've never really come across a PT business that has like a group of a few partners. So I guess that was like my initial thought was like, I want my employees to come in and feel like they're running their own practice, and we are partners and we're sharing overhead, and we all have a little bit of more stake in the game and are incentivized to succeed long term. And then I guess to back up, like, so for Sunil, who was my first PT hire, at the very beginning, I paid him basically like a base salary when he had no clients at the time, where we did 3 months of training / marketing / trying to get him off the ground. So he had at least some stable pay at the beginning, where I guess if you want to call it that, I kind of bought his time, like Morgan said, got him away from his other job, got him in under my roof, had time to teach him how to succeed in a cash PT business. And then once his completed revenue got to a point where 50% of that exceeded the base salary, then he flipped to a commission formula and his pay increased based on his success. Cool. Yeah. As far as the admin hire, as I described before, Susan had a lot of experience and, was, I think, probably unique when it comes to, who you would find. So I chose to pay her hourly at the beginning as a W-2 employee, salary at the beginning as a W-2 employee, kind of on the higher end of the admin scale. And then she also has basically like a profit share. So she's been with me for 3 months now. Instead of giving her raises every year, I've given her a % of the profit monthly as a bonus. And she, like I told you before, she does a lot of the finance side of the business. So she has visibility. I guess this is another kind of caveat. So I didn't like working for other people and not having visibility to the finances. Like it was always this, like, what's going on behind the scenes thing. And okay, I'm making 80 grand, but you don't really have visibility of what's going on back there or where all the money's going. So I chose to be pretty upfront and give basically Sunil and Susan right now have very good visibility to basically like how much money is coming in every month, how much the expenses are, how much each other are being paid. And I thought that, and again, that was because I was frustrated not knowing that as an employee, like not knowing how much the business owner was making. So I actually show my employees what I'm paying myself, what they're making. And I feel like that's a good way to kind of feel like it's fair and feel like everyone kind of knows what's going on.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that the like transparency, I feel like that transparency and honesty like really builds good relationships with your employees as well.
For sure.
And everything's just like above board.
For sure.
Um,
I think long story short, like when it comes to structuring a contract, like one, it's kind of individualized for what, what that employee wants or what's important to them. And then two, I feel like having some form of an incentive to where when your business succeeds, they succeed financially. Mm-hmm. I think those are important pieces to keep in mind.
Yeah, I love that. And then I had a question really quick about bullet number 1 as well, because I get asked this all the time. How much do you save? How do you know how much to put in savings?
Mm-hmm. I guess I don't have like a clear rule for that. I would guess that my initial thoughts when you're small, like, and the numbers are smaller, like obviously just saving something every month, I think would be my first piece of advice, even if it's a couple percent or 5% or whatever it is. And then when you experience those periods of growth where like, okay, then where you're like, man, I killed it that month and there's some extra money for the first time, try not to pay yourself all of that. And take those opportunities when you do have success to like save a bigger chunk, if that makes sense. So I guess my initial thought would be like save 5% a month on the bad months, and then on good months, raise that percentage and try and get to the point where you're comfortable in that 3 to 6 months. And that way, when an opportunity comes along that you're going to need some money for, whether it's hiring someone or marketing or whatever it may be, then you feel like you can go ahead and do that, take advantage of that opportunity because it's good for your business and not feel like it puts you behind with, where you're at with savings or makes you feel nervous.
Yeah. I think that like, if I could go back now and do things differently at the beginning, I would have started doing this from like month 1. And I think it's difficult when you're first getting started and you only like in your first month make like a few hundred or a few $1,000s and like you want to pay yourself, but also like don't know how and then like don't know what to do. Like having just some kind of range of like what to set aside and leave in the business, I think is helpful. So like setting aside like 5 to 10% a month, I think is, at least that's what I do. And it's definitely made a huge difference because you're right. Like it makes you feel a whole lot less nervous all the time.
And then when that's sitting there and you do have a good month or you feel like you want to pay yourself, then you have a chunk of money sitting there that you can, reward yourself when you need it or when you feel like you deserve it.
Yeah, exactly. Or like last year I sent my VA like a Christmas bonus. So like that was fun to do too.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool.
I guess I would, one last thing I would add is like, how do you decide to pay yourself, right? Like that's always a hard thing to do. And I can't say that I've been that disciplined about doing it the same way all the way through, but I feel like having some structure to how you do pay yourself every month is important, where you're not just like, oh, there's money there and I'm going to pay myself this. Like, so at least the way I do it now, it took me a little while to figure out, what that partnership track that I mentioned was going to be like. But once I kind of settled on that, got someone else kind of on that track, then basically now I choose to pay myself like I'm a partner in the business. And then I also pay myself a percentage of profit. So at this stage, like I still have I have a full caseload. So I take the visits that I did the month before. I'm at the highest of the partnership track that I've set up. So I pay myself 60% of that number. And then if we turn a profit, then I have 15% of the profit. That leaves me a percentage for Susan's bonus and then a percentage to save. And then some months we don't turn a profit, so I don't get that 15%. Susan doesn't get her percentage, and then we're in the hole, or whatever you want to call it. So but having some form of structure or plan for how you're going to pay yourself every month, I think, is important to kind of, and it may change as you go through different periods, but that would be my thoughts.
Yeah, I like that. And that's the same way that I pay myself too. Like just coming up with a plan, and like maybe just starting with percentages. Like I usually share with people is out of 100%, maybe you pay yourself 50, you leave 30 for expenses, and then 15 for taxes and 5% for savings.
Yeah.
And like just from baseline, if you have no idea what you're doing or what your numbers look like, starting with that at least gives you like some kind of money in each of your buckets, and then you can start to change the percentages as appropriate, or move into a more advanced version like you outlined there, and do stuff with that. Because I feel like not a lot, but like some people who I've talked to, they either end up paying themselves everything, which is a problem, or they never pay themselves for like 6 months, which is also a problem, So yeah.
And I think people too, some people are natural I was always kind of more of a natural saver. Some people are more probably natural spenders or whatnot, but knowing what your tendency is and then kind of setting up a set of rules that holds yourself accountable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And like the more like tangible things can be with like specific numbers and stuff, I think the better too. Cool. Assam, did you have any other questions on money stuff? Awesome. Cool. So let's move into clinical stuff.
So this is obviously thinking about a first PT hire, but all businesses have a different ideal client, right? So my business is concierge in-home. So our ideal client tends to be an older geriatric client with chronic orthopedic problems, and that's who we've had our best success with. But so when you're looking at a PT, if I were to hire someone that was had all their experience in young athletes and wanted to be at the gym with the SOM, that person might not be the ideal person to step into my business and start treating, the geriatric population. So knowing what your ideal client is, and sometimes that's a really hard thing, and I can't say that we know exactly who that ideal client is always, but thinking about who that person is, thinking about the success of who you market to the best, and then assessing what type of PT is ideal to treat that ideal client, I think is an important concept to understand. And whether but I also, on the flip side, think there can be some value to having someone as a PT that offers something that you don't. So for example, Mike, our new PT, does dry needling, his skill set lends itself to a little bit younger, more active population than I would say that we're getting. So I think there's good and bad things in both, but probably not having all of your eggs in one basket is probably the best. So having someone that can treat your ideal client, but maybe then also can appeal to another client is probably ideal. Years and type of experience. So obviously having someone with that's a new grad coming out of a school or has not a lot of clinical experience is going to lend itself to, more training from a clinical perspective from you as the business owner. So I've kind of decided early on that I thought that having new grads in a business where we're going into people's homes is probably not ideal. Just it's not the best breeding ground to be having to train people on clinical stuff. So most of my recruiting when it comes to PTs is trying to find people with five plus years of experience and kind of with at least some experience in the ideal client that we market best to. And then if they have some other skill set or something else that they lend to on top of that, then that's an added bonus. So what type of training and mentorship do they need? But, let's use Assam's practice as an example. Like it sounds like he's in gyms and maybe treating more young active clientele. His gym may be a good environment for a new grad that you can train, that comes to you with a blank slate and can ramp up their clinical skill set and appeal to that client over times. But just something to think about. specialty areas, are they marketable? So, there's a lot of specialty areas in PT. Some are more marketable than others. Morgan's getting into the women's health, pelvic health thing, which seems to be very marketable and and very popular right now. I was kind of more of a manual therapy certified, kind of like orthopedic specialist, I guess, if you want to call it that. But I haven't really done any of like the hot topic like stuff. But I guess to use my business as an example, so I'm kind of more general orthopedics, did outpatient, did home health, kind of can appeal to most everyone. Sunil does vestibular, which we've marketed a little bit to our physicians, and does Graston's, so like some of the instrument assisted stuff. Mike, who's coming on with us, does dry needling. Emily, who's one of our contractors, is more like skilled nursing background. That is more like complicated medical geriatric kind of skill set. That is great. And then Rick, one of our other contractors, does like Parkinson's specific stuff, weight loss stuff. So at least in my business, we're kind of all over the map when it comes to the ideal client, but everyone can appeal to the one ideal client that we market best to, which I think is the important thing. Any questions surrounding that as far as like, and I think this conversation also connects to like, where do you see your business 5 to 10 years down the road, right? So if you know that you're pigeoned into one ideal client, and that is the ideal client that you've been successful with, that all your marketing is surrounding, I think that's a pretty good thing. I would say my business being a little bit more all over the place, like poses some challenges then, right? Because you have to put marketing time into 5 different ideal clients versus one ideal client. So I would say my business may not be a good example of maybe what I would advise other people to do. But having, that bread and butter ideal client and the bread and butter PTs that are good at treating that, I think is the main takeaway there.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. And do you do like any, like when you hire somebody new, like do you ever do like I think you told me that you do, but like co-treating, like going with them like on their first few sessions or something?
I do, yeah. I think that's a great way to get people into the business and get them comfortable. At least in my case, like not all the PTs that I hired had done in-home care. Like they've all done a right ideal client, but they haven't carried a treatment table into someone's home before. So they all did some observing with me. And then, I would look over my caseload at the time to pick out a few clients that I thought would be open to seeing someone else, or try and get them in there when I'm on vacation, with some clients that we can talk through the clinical side of things and bounce ideas off of, so we both get a good feel for how we operate and how we can operate for a client together. So I do think, co-treating is really ideal at the beginning when you're trying to ramp a PT up. And there's nothing that feels better than when you bring in another PT and the client likes the other PT better and then takes them off your schedule and starts to treat them. That is like the best thing possible.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's so funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
But on the flip side, then you also have the ones that only want to see you. And that's always a really kind of difficult thing to navigate as a business owner too, is trying to figure out, which patients to see yourself and which to pass to someone else, or how to kind of navigate that. So
Yeah, I'm sure. And I guess like, I don't know if this is like an answerable question or if it just like depends on the situation, but I guess with that, like, how do you decide, like, do you keep like all of your patients that you've had for a while and then just like wait until they're discharged? Or do you give like only new patients to like your new PTs, or do you take like your OGs and start to pass those off if you want to start to offload your caseload?
That's a good question. I feel like I don't necessarily have like a concrete process to it, but
Yeah.
I would say in my head, I probably have my caseload in different buckets, right? Like I have a certain bucket of like, these are people that have been with me forever that I know will not be open to seeing anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I know, like, kind of, if I'm on vacation, they're not going to be seen, like that type of thing. And then there's kind of like the middle ground people who I know had maybe been treated by the other PT once or twice or whatever it is, are open to seeing someone else, or maybe would benefit from one of the skills that the other PTs have. Mm-hmm. That, you know, I know there's a potential opportunity there to get one of my other PTs, you know, someone on their caseload or some co-treating opportunities. And then there's like a bucket of, I'm way too busy at the you know, I'm too busy and I need to cap it right now. And any new patient or any opportunity has to go to, you know, one or the other PTs because I'm full.
Yeah.
But I guess, and then the other caveat to that would be, like, it depends on where the referral's coming from. Like, for example, like I have my main referral source is a concierge medicine doctor, you know, that I've been working really hard to kind of be the go-to person for. So if we haven't seen a referral from him for a while and he sends us someone and then sends me an email, like, and you're getting the gist that he wants you to see the person, and, you know, that's going to help me from a marketing perspective, then I'll jump in and be like, okay, I'm going to see this person, do a really good job, continue to, you know, use this opportunity as continuing to maintain the relationship with a referral source. So if it's like kind of one of those important people or referral sources, then I'll jump in on those ones for sure. But there also comes a time where you just need to relinquish control and trust the people that you hire, and know that they're going to have a period where they need to figure it out for themselves, and they need to, you know, crash and burn a couple times and not be as good as you are.
Yeah. And I think that's like a good point to bring up too, is like kind of internalizing, like, if somebody can do 80% as good of a job as you can, then like that's good enough and it'll get the job done. So something to remember. Hard to do in practice sometimes, but good to remember for sure.
I think that's an important skill set to build as a business owner, because, and I'm guilty of this, especially right now, is just if you have too many patients, it's going to hold you back from growing your business. There's no way around that. And
right.
So I've gone through these waves of like, okay, my caseload is low. That's when my business grows the most, usually. Then my caseload's too high, then none of the other things, you know, get time and energy, and you don't move the business forward as a whole. So like kind of, I think that's a really important thing to kind of understand. And I guess another piece of advice to a younger business owner when you're trying to hire is making sure that you have the time when you bring that first hire on, knowing that there's going to be a lot of work there for you when you first bring the initial hire on. So being able to map out time in your calendar to devote to, you know, getting that person where they need to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Just based on like the experience that one of our clients is having now with hiring people, is like the training just took like a lot longer than he thought it would. And I feel like the thing that I've learned the most about like growing a business and like planning and like having like a long-term vision is, as much as you might want like the result right now, like you might want that admin to start tomorrow and get things going, like you do need the time. And so like looking at your calendar and saying like, okay, how much time will it actually take me to put together my SOPs or whatever it is? And then how much time will it take to go through that? Like you might look at your calendar and realize that the best time for them to start might not be until next month, you know, and then the training's going to take the whole month. And then you can kind of like start to look at it on a longer timeline instead of just like right now. And the more that you can plan that out, like the less stressful it will be.
For sure. I think viewing the new employee coming on as like offloading you, you should actually be viewing that as onloading you with a lot of work in the short term, and kind of flipping that around and being prepared for the stress and the time invested in, you know, working with the new employee. And that's, I think, something that I, you know, with a new PT coming on in November, like, and feeling like myself and my other PT are really busy right now, like I'm making that mistake in my head of, oh, we're waiting for Mike to come on so that, you know, we don't have to see all these patients. But really, like, Mike is going to take a little time he's going to take time for me and our staff as well, you know, when he comes on, to get him up to speed.
Yeah. Yeah, and so at least like having that expectation that it's going to be a lot, I think sometimes can help too. So at least you can like mentally prepare before you jump in.
For sure.
Cool. So let's talk about personality stuff.
Yeah. I've probably done maybe 30, 40 interviews of potential PTs at this point, and I think that it's a really fun thing to kind of network with other people and have the conversations because you can all relate to each other really well. And I think that the third bullet down there, so when I say like X factor versus clinical, so when you think about kind of like the skill set of a physical therapist coming in and who will be the most successful treating patients in a cash PT environment, initially I thought I was way more on like the clinical side, thinking, okay, this person needs to be super experienced. They need to be super knowledgeable. They need to be really good manual therapists. They need to be like, this clinical guru type of PT that we've all probably been around. The more that I've been in the business, the more that I've shifted that focus away from that and realized that this other kind of undescribable characteristic that I call the X factor, because can't find another name for it, is the most important thing. Like, and you guys know from treating in cash PT environment, like that person, you need to be able to build relationships with people, build trust with people, have people like you. You have to be somewhat good clinically, but it has to be kind of like a certain personality and a certain type of person that I think will succeed. That's probably more 75% on the X factor side and more 25 on the clinical side, when I thought that number was reversed at the beginning. So this person needs to be an energy giver. Like I can't see like an energy taker being someone who does very well in this type of PT business environment. So if you guys have been in clinics with other PTs, you've probably seen like the energy takers, the people that are kind of overwhelmed easily, people who are a little bit more pessimistic or complainers, or maybe don't seem too enthusiastic when they're talking to a patient. Like usually you can get a sense of that type of person initially, and that's probably a good sign that they may not be the right fit. But in a 15-minute phone call with a prospective PT, where you're going to pick up right away on someone who's more of an energy giver. There's a level of excitement to the way that they talk. They're passionate about the clinical side. They're passionate about probably entering a smaller business with aspirations to grow, and kind of this uncertainty kind of period where they're the first hire, for you. So I think that's important. Like someone that comes in and asks questions about how they're going to be paid, what their schedule is, what type of patients they're going to be seeing, and, doesn't have a lot of excitement. It's all kind of about them and not about, your business and where you want to take it, and kind of this more team type of conversation. I feel like those kind of signs, are key when evaluating talent. So when I'm talking to a PT, first thing I'm looking for that energy giver. Secondly, someone that's a little bit more ambitious, maybe brings new ideas to the table. So when I interviewed Sunil, who's my first successful full-time hire, that conversation initially, like we just clicked. Like we were both super excited about, where the business was at, him being able to leave Athletico and enter this other kind of uncharted territory. Like he was excited about that. He wasn't nervous about that. And he was more of like an action taker that was going to bring ideas to the table versus someone that's kind of just following the plan more passively. We already talked a little bit about having to lend to the ideal client, and then kind of thinking about whether they fit your brand or not. And I think it's a hard thing to decide like what your brand is, right? But you kind of have this view of the type of person that you want representing your business. So I guess just thinking about that when, you meet the person face to face for the first time, are they going to be someone that you feel confident about, standing in front of a potential client representing you? And then I guess Morgan alluded to before, like understanding yourself and kind of some of the traits that you have that allowed yourself to succeed in your own business, and finding someone that aligns itself with some of those traits or has some of the same strengths as you, but then also similar to that ideal client conversation, maybe also plays to some of your weaknesses. So, for example, I feel at least that my strengths are more kind of on the clinical side, but in the sales side and the relationship marketing side, I don't feel comfortable with or confident in the digital marketing side, the financial side, and mostly those two. So Sunil came on with me, and I felt like he checked the box of the energy giver. He was ambitious. He was an action taker, not a follower. Like, he definitely had that kind of X factor of someone that you feel comfortable with, someone who talks confidently, someone that I would feel confident representing my brand. But he is much better on the digital marketing side, like the technology side. So I also saw like potential there of some box that he could check that I didn't feel confident in. And then with Mike, same thing. Like, I felt like he checked all these boxes as well. But I see a lot of the same traits in him that I felt like I had. And I guess another interviewing tactic, like, so I have a shoulder issue. So when I was interviewing Mike, like, I had him basically eval my shoulder, treat my shoulder. And that's a really good way to kind of get an idea of, okay, like, how does this PT talk to someone? How does he do clinically? So that was really helpful for me, like, basically just being his patient. And, you know, it gave me insight into the fact that he made my shoulder feel better in about 2 visits. I was like, so I kind of evaluated in him the fact that he was like on another level than me clinically, which was awesome. And then I also saw like the potential on these other boxes where, you know, he hasn't been in an environment where he has been able to sell him or had to sell himself, or doesn't know the cash side of it, the marketing side of it, and those other things. But the clinical box was checked for me right away. Any other thoughts on like personality or evaluating potential PTs?
I mean, I think like you and I were kind of talking about this before we started the workshop and everything, but I think just like putting a lot of emphasis on like the X factor piece, like it does, it sounds kind of like cliche, I guess, like X factor, but I feel like this year for me has really taught me that like that piece is so incredibly important. Like, I know we talk a lot about like looking for your ideal client and describing them in terms of like what their lifestyle is and what their problems are and all that kind of stuff for your marketing message. But like, you also have to look for an ideal client in terms of somebody that you like genuinely vibe with. Like, it has to be like a comfortable conversation, both for like patients, like I'm talking about, but also for your team and the people that you're hiring. And if it is weird to talk to somebody, then it is not going to be a good fit. Even if on paper they have like the skill set and everything, it's not worth that like kind of like friction that might be there if like you guys don't really line up. And like Jeff said, it's really hard to like put it into words and really like identify it objectively, but I feel like it's something that you'll know, like just by talking to them, like you'll click like whether it's a good fit with that. And like the other kind of piece that I found with the X factor too is just like the ability for somebody to take initiative. You know, like if you have to like in this context, like with cash PT, where you have to go out and find your own patients and everything, like if you have to think for yourself and think for the other person all the time, then it becomes like a lot. And instead of like in the long term helping to like expand and offload off of you, it ends up not really like meeting those needs is kind of what I found. So like being able to take that initiative and like ask questions and communicate too. Communication, I think, is really important. I think they all lend themselves to making a good fit.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any words of wisdom, Assam, on your end? Cool. Motivation factor. I kind of like what we were just talking about.
Yeah, and as I described with my first PT hire, like, and what kind of motivated me to put together that partnership track was also like, again, thinking about the 5 to 10 years down the road. So our industry in general tends to have quite a bit of turnover with PTs going to different clinics, right? Or jumping from company to company. So one thing I tried to think about ahead of time with the 2 hires that I've made so far were, someone that I felt like was motivated to grow the business with me and was incentivized to do so. So Susan, my admin, will admit, and we've talked about this as a team before, like she's very money motivated. So she's like, I always want to, make more money. Like some people are motivated by finances, and that's okay. Like that's something that we're all probably somewhat motivated in. So with that being said, like with a physical therapist, if you know that they're motivated by money, then that gives you a little bit of negotiation power with them, and you know what they want. So you can use that to incentivize them, to work with you and stay with you for a long time. Other people like maybe motivated more by like a flexible schedule or feeling like they have to, or they want to spend more time with their family or want to have, a day of the week off or whatever it may be. So that might be something that you could help paint a picture for an employee. Or clinical passion. Like you have those PTs that want to do con eds and they want to get better at a skill set. So kind of like categorizing what you feel like is the main motivation factor for an admin employee or a PT employee and kind of understanding what that is, I think is important. And then having a conversation about their long-term motivation, right? So is someone interested in a partnership or ownership, or are they just looking to have, a solid job, full-time or part-time, location, and where do they want to be in 5 to 10 years? So I guess just main thing, having a deeper level understanding of who the person is, what motivates them, and, where they want to be in the long term is important to have some insight on before, you take a big risk on them. So with Sunil, the first PT, like it's kind of interesting. So he had a baby right around his first daughter, right around the time that he started with me. Right. So, we come into this negotiation about changing jobs, and his wife is due 2 or 3 months after, like he's going to start training with me. So, his motivation at the time before baby comes out changes a little bit once he kind of becomes a dad, right? And we're kind of having to navigate, okay, at the beginning, he was more motivated by kind of money and wanting a partnership and wanting to be part of this 5 to 10 year plan. And then, some people's priorities change when it comes to changes with their family and whatnot. And now, but the cool thing, I think, at least in his case, like when his priorities changed, then he was able to then, because of the commission-based structure that he's on, like he's not forced to work 40 to 50 hours a week if he doesn't want to. Like if he wants to back down his caseload a little bit and make a little bit less money and have a little bit more flexibility, then he kind of has the arena to do that, which I think is a really cool thing that we don't usually have in healthcare jobs. We're on a salaried structure with another company. So he's chosen now I thought I wanted to treat 30 or 35 a week and make a lot of money. And now he wants to be a little more home when his daughter needs him and, go on vacation with his wife and this and that. And he is able to do that because of that employment structure that he's on, which is great.
Cool. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to be able to have all of the options.
Yeah, for sure. Morgan, what's your top motivating priority as a business owner?
Top motivating priority as a business owner. I also really like money. Just gonna put that out there.
Who doesn't?
But I guess I would say, like, for me too, in combination with that, like I've been doing like a lot of reflecting lately, and I really like the fact that like I can go and work out at whatever time I want in the morning, and like make my schedule around that. And like I also get to walk my dog every day. Like if I was still working in the outpatient clinic, like there's no way that I would be able to like do that and work out in the morning, without getting up at 3 a.m. And like I get to hang out with my dog all the time. So like I really like that. So kind of like the flexibility, like you said, as well. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and pick all three of these because like the third piece for me is just like I've always really liked working with athletes, but I don't like doing high volume. I don't like it at all. Like I would rather have like really in-depth like relationships and conversations with my patients. And so being in control of my caseload, like you were saying, where I can have like a handful of patients and like be happy doing physical therapy, like that also really means a lot to me. So not one answer, all of them, but
And a way that I like to describe it or sum up what you just said is like building your job around your life, not your life around your job. Like
right.
when I was working for an outpatient clinic, I was there 60, 70 hours a week. There was no flexibility. You're there when the first patient ends, you're closing the clinic down or whatever. We've all probably been there where you're just overstretched, but there was no way to change that really at all.
Mm-hmm.
And now, at least in my situation, like I have the flexibility to then, take a 3-day weekend when you want to take a 3-day weekend, start late when you want to start late, end early when you want to end early, and, feel like you're okay doing that. It was always frowned upon working for other people. So that's a pretty cool thing, I think, in a medical business to be able to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I remember in my first job too, like when I was really just struggling, like feeling really overwhelmed. So, like I was working 40 hours and I asked to work 38 instead. And they said no. And I was like, what the heck?
Not surprised.
Yeah. So then I was like, okay, see you guys later. Bye. I'm not working here anymore. But yeah, it's a really awesome opportunity. And I think like the fact that we can grow to a point where you can offer that opportunity to somebody else is also really cool.
And I think there's PTs in, like we talked about, I had caseload in different buckets. Like there's potential PTs in different buckets, right? Like you have a really highly motivated PT that wants to make money, wants to be an owner or a partner, and wants to work a lot. Like you can create an environment for that person. You also have someone that is a really good X Factor employee that wants to treat 10 patients a week and just have a manageable schedule and make good money for the time that they put in. Like you can create an environment for that. My wife's knocking on the window. Sorry. And then like that clinical passion PT, like you may find someone that just really wants to treat pelvic health or whatever it is, and you can create an environment for that. So it's cool to have that flexibility within your business.
Yeah, absolutely. Marketing.
My least favorite.
My most favorite.
So I guess stemming off that last conversation, understanding like kind of where your company's volume is at and understanding where your marketing is at going into a hire will help you figure out kind of what the right timing is. You're never going to feel 100% like it's the right time, but having a good idea of how many new clients a month that you're generating, or how many leads a month you're generating, how many you're converting to new evals, how many new evals you're converting to plans of care, kind of knowing where all those numbers are at going into your hire will help you, project the timing of when you want a PT on. Establishing target percentage and reaching your target consistently. So in Assam's case, he's the main treating therapist in his company right now. So I don't know, Assam, if you can answer this, but like how many patients a week do you want to be seeing, or what would you say your target would be monthly, where you're in a place where you're bringing in good money and you're feeling like you're ready to expand and hire? Do you have an idea of what that number is? I guess patient visits per month.
Per month, I was thinking like anywhere between 20 and 25 per week, consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
So,
with even like a wait list.
Yeah, 80 to 100. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
So I think just establishing like where you want your own caseload to be, like somewhere that it's comfortable for the business, but also comfortable for you to have time to bring on that hire, like we talked about. And then is that marketing consistent enough to support a building up a new caseload for a new staff. Do you have a wait list? Do you not have a wait list? Should you have a wait list? And then just feeling like you're confident that if and when that person comes on, that you are able to generate new leads when you want to. So in my, I guess, example, and one thing we haven't alluded to yet, kind of the difference between Morgan's business and my business. My business is very heavy on the marketing to physicians, marketing through word of mouth and relationship marketing, I call it. We are pretty weak when it comes to marketing off of our website, Instagram, or digital marketing, hence the strengths and weaknesses of the business owner. So in my case, when I am deciding to hire Mike, essentially our two therapists right now, myself and Sunil, we each have our own independent kind of target percentage, which basically that's the number of visits that we're wanting to do. And he decides his, I decide mine. So his target is 100 a month, similar to Assam. My target is 120 a month because I'm a crazy workaholic. And the money that I'm bringing in allows me to save and feel comfortable making that next hire. But so in my case, like we were both hitting our target percentage on a regular basis. We were starting to go over that target percentage, and our relationship marketing was working well enough to where we were getting enough new leads and enough conversions to evals on a regular basis where I felt, time to start looking at hiring. And then when it comes to evaluating the new PT, another thing that we haven't talked about is kind of, does that PT come in and bring any marketing opportunities? For example, Mike lives in a neighborhood that is kind of like in the center of where most of our marketing leads are. He's been in the neighborhood with his wife, who's a realtor. He has a lot of connections and, potential marketing opportunities because of the relationships with him and his wife in their neighborhood. So that's kind of an added bonus to me that adds to this equation of or confidence of whether we can generate new leads for him when we need to. If I buy his time, he comes on in November and we leverage all of our normal marketing strategies, and then we add on the additional things that Mike brings to the table with some of his connections. Then that gave me the confidence to say, okay, I think this is a good decision.
Cool.
Anything to add there from the marketing master?
No, I think the biggest thing here, and like what I would definitely consider if I were planning to hire somebody is the whole feeling confident that you can generate new leads when needed, and just having a concrete process, not only the goal that you outlined here with a target percentage, but knowing the exact process for generating leads, what you would do on your own so that you can teach it to somebody else. And it sounds it might sound like it's kind of overkill to write out that process exactly, point by point by point, but you can't just expect somebody who's new to this kind of stuff to be successful right off the bat without having those processes. So that kind of tedious piece of it will help make your marketing a lot more successful too.
And if you feel like you're not checking the box, you're not at the target percentage, you're not confident with where your marketing is, then that tells you, maybe you need to take a few months to devote more time to the marketing piece before and delay, taking the risk with that new hire.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And then you can go through your process and see where the bottleneck might be, and then improve it so that you are eventually able to hire. So just some thoughts on that. And then we have timing.
So every person's business is different, but some people's business have some seasonality to it. So kind of understanding what season of the year or what season within the cycles of your business that is the best time to bring on a new employee or onboard an employee. So maybe with an admin hire, like we talked about, you're going to need to spend some time training, maybe timing the hire with a lower point in your volume, which frees you up with some time to spend more on training. or vice versa. There's some seasonality to the marketing side of your business where you're successful at a certain time of the year. That might be a good time to bring on a new PT when you know that you'll be more confident in being able to generate new leads at that time and get them off to a good start. So that's kind of like the owner's schedule or plan for training onboarding. So an example of this, and an employee family vacation. So Mike, when we were negotiating back and forth, he had come to me in advance and said, "Hey, I have my 10-year anniversary. We're taking a 2-week trip to Arizona, like in October." So ideally for me, like the timing of having him come on earlier was probably better, but knowing that he had 2 weeks where I wasn't going to tell him not to go on vacation with his wife. So we decided to basically delay him starting till November 1st so that he doesn't come on, start with a caseload and then peace out for 2 weeks. So just a good example of like setting up the employee for success and trying to plan around some of the variables, both on your side and the employee's side to map out the time on your end, on the employee's end, to try and peak at the right time for that caseload buildup.
Yeah, I think that's definitely good. And kind of like going back to what I was saying too, like the further ahead that you can look, like past like just this month, the better off you're going to be. And I think that this is really helpful.
And then one more example, like when Sunil came on, we talked about him having a baby. So I actually brought him on knowing that we weren't going to give him any new patients, and we just did all the training and observing and kind of marketing stuff. So he came on for a short period of time for like 4 to 6 weeks and just did that piece of it, and then took a paternity leave, did what he needed to do for baby. And then we knew he was going to come on late September. We had a start date, after the baby that we could then plan and try and peak for the marketing to bring in new leads and try and ramp up his caseload.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's nice that you can be in charge of all of that and have an understanding employer.
Yeah.
And then I think this was our last slide about just kind of, maybe you've decided to hire. So now how do we find people to hire?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of different ways to go about it, and I can just speak to, I guess, my experience up to this point. But we've used sites like Indeed, some of like the bigger one where we've posted jobs before and we've attracted resumes pretty quickly. I would say with some of the bigger ones, you tend to get a lot of resumes that you kind of throw away, a lot of them. But I did find my admin employee from an Indeed post and kind of just read a resume and was like, wow, that's a really good resume. And went into the interview process from there. About the interview process, at least the process that I've used. So for Susan or the admin, I typically do like a 15 to 30 minute phone call first. And that gives me a chance to just gauge basically what I'm looking for is the X factor. And, you talk to someone on the phone, you're going to get a good sense of, like Morgan said, like, do your personalities mix? Is there energy to the conversation? Are they excited about what you do? And usually that's going to just put them in their potential box, or nope, not going to happen. Usually you're going to know pretty quickly after one phone conversation. Then from there, I would usually go to like an in-person. I like to do more informal kind of meetings, coffee shops or whatever it is, or video calls due to COVID, where you at least kind of get the FaceTime and get in a little deeper into the conversation. So usually we have kind of like at least three touch points on someone. Now that Susan's been on with me and we've been kind of like doing a lot of interviews for potential PTs, Susan, being the skilled admin that she is really good on the phone. She's really good at kind of evaluating the type of people that we want. So she has been kind of scouring through resumes, and she'll set up phone calls with PTs and just have that initial 15-minute conversation and be able to say, okay, this person has potential or doesn't, which is really helpful for me. And then by the time they get to me, they're already we've seen the resume, Susan's vetted, their background, they're an experienced PT that we feel can appeal to our ideal client. Susan has a phone call and judges, okay, do they have like X factor? Can they gel with the team? And then, by the time I either talk to them or meet to them, then we have hopefully a little bit higher quality candidate. Um, when it comes to, I guess, specific interview questions, again, my style tends to just be more laid back and conversational, and I tend to, ask some like family and interests in sports and things like kind of outside of work a little bit, just to get a feel, for that side of it, and then try and dive in. Another, I guess, main thing that I'm looking for in a PT is someone who, and we all are obviously this way, but they're kind of like motivated to create something that's different from the rest of the profession. Like, I guess my opinion from working with other people, like the PT profession as a whole is kind of getting a little bit watered down. So someone who's motivated to kind of prove the fact that being a PT can be a good job and can be a fun job and can be, the job that we all hoped it would be when we went to school for this. So someone who's kind of motivated to like prove the system wrong, I guess, is what I'm getting at, is important to me. And then back to like attracting people. So like I said, I got lucky and like found some good people on Indeed, but I think like a first good place to start if you're in an area that a lot of people is just relationship, social media, marketing. If you have a lot of contacts on there, which I don't, but going through like your previous employers, people you've worked with in the past. So I keep in touch with a lot of my former coworkers and other business owners, other people in other businesses, where if I'm looking for someone, I'll shoot out some text messages or emails just saying, hey, I'm looking to, hire a PT. Do you have anyone that's maybe looking to make a trip, anytime a PT gets vetted from someone else that and trust is always a helpful first step. Outside of that, I would say in general, that's kind of my process up to this point. Morgan, do you have anything to add?
That's what I was just gonna say about like, going through like people that like I currently work with a VA, a virtual assistant, and I've worked with another one before, and like it's always been more, I guess, like my style is to like reach out to people that I know and just kind of look and see like who I can find and like, find that like common connection. Like I like hiring people that I know, versus like complete strangers. And that's kind of been the way that I've done it. And I feel like it's also been like a little bit easier maybe too, because like I already kind of know them. And that's been kind of my process. And I think, overall, just remembering that like whoever it is that you hire, they're not like inside your brain. And so like having the patience to communicate with them, what it is that you're looking for, and also like understanding that they're going to do it their own way. And like that can be just as good, if not better sometimes. Like that kind of like teamwork and like working together is going to happen. So just like having the patience and communicating, I think, with anybody that you end up hiring or working with is really important. And it's going to be a learning experience for both of you. So as long as you remember that, then like hopefully it'll be a little bit less pressure too.
Yeah, I think the last thing I would add is just to be patient with the process. Like I think like get really excited when I meet someone and I like want to like jump right into it. But I guess in making some mistakes over the last few years, like I would just say if there's any like kind of bad feeling about it, usually it's probably not a good choice. You have to convince yourself in your head, like, oh, they're not ideal, but like, oh, I think they're good enough, like sort of thing. Like make sure it's kind of a slam dunk and you're excited to have them on your team. That they're going to be successful before you choose to invest a lot of time and money and risk, in someone that you trust with your brand.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And always goes back to vibes. Like you'll know like if it's going to be a good decision, and trusting your gut on that. So Assam, who are you going to hire? What's your next step?
My thought process is honestly use Instagram. Like people I know through Instagram, PTs I know through Instagram, reach out to them first. just because they're going to help with marketing just right off the bat. And I've seen like what they do. So that's kind of the thought process for me right now.
Cool. That's awesome. Do you have like any other like questions on any of this stuff?
Yeah. For benefits, how did you decide like what to do?
Yeah.
Benefits-wise?
I guess I would just say, like, I've only had two employees, that needed benefits. So in my situation, I found the person that I knew would succeed. Then we go into some negotiation about, like, okay, Susan, like, what do you need to be able to make this work, right? And in her case, like, she didn't need healthcare insurance. She already had insurance that she liked. She was single, not needing a ton of benefits for family. So she wasn't necessarily interested at the time in a 401k or healthcare insurance. But for her, I give her a tax-free healthcare stipend, which allows her to put some money towards her healthcare insurance herself. So in that case, like, I customize it to fit her. Myself and Sunil, both of our wives are in healthcare. So they have full-time jobs with benefits. So our family's healthcare is through our wives. So we haven't really had to, that was helpful, when you're a small business trying to build up. And then Mike's my new hire that's coming on with us. And he's the first one that, needs full insurance and benefits for his family. So we've recently gone through our paychecks. So the same company that we use for our paychecks also has like the healthcare benefits option built into it. So we've worked with a representative through them to, offer plans and options. And Mike's selected a plan for his family. And then part of the negotiation was basically how much do I cover of his healthcare as the employer, and how much he covers as the employee. Which again, it's kind of a big range as to what companies do as far as that. But it was helpful for me to kind of see, okay, how much is it going to cost the business to provide healthcare? And how much will be on me versus the employee, and kind of go through that whole process. And I haven't necessarily dabbled with like the 401k thing yet, but that will probably be my next challenge, is to try and figure that piece out. So I can't necessarily speak to that side of it from experience. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But obviously, if you're going to scale and plan to bring on multiple employees, like, you're going to have options for benefits at some point. So I feel like, the earlier you at least understand how it works and figure out an avenue to be able to offer it when the time comes, and kind of plan for it, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Any other questions, Assam?
No, everything else was answered in the presentation.
Pretty thorough.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I blabbed for like 2 hours. Almost.
It like goes longer than you think it will. Like, I didn't last time. I didn't think it was going to be 2 hours, and then I looked and I was like, well, shoot, like, goodness. And then Megan, I don't know if you're here with us or if you can hear us or anything, but if you have any questions, feel free to come on. But yeah, well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for all of this information. This is really helpful, I think, and just kind of figuring out, not only the transition from going from, solo to hiring somebody, but like whether it's for you or not. And there's a lot more to consider than just, I need somebody to take my patients. So this is really great. Do you have any last takeaways or anything?
I don't think so. I think after 2 hours, I've kind of unloaded and blabbed a little bit too much, and hopefully, in the mess of my blabbing, hopefully the goal was to pull 2 or 3 key concepts, or get you to think about it maybe a little bit differently than you were thinking about it already, and hopefully bring some more considerations to the table, surrounding that big decision.
Cool. Well, awesome. Well, thanks again so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. I'll send out an email sometime this week with Jeff's information, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, if you guys have any questions, let us know. But otherwise, thanks so much for coming, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone. Thanks for staying focused. I like it.
Super helpful. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
All right. Have a good one.